And thank you all for joining us for the Creatives Roundtable Lunchtime Special featuring Melinda Livsey. I'm your host, Nancy Russo. The Creatives Roundtable is an online community of creative business owners focused on making their business a priority. We have monthly moderated sessions that help members set measurable and attainable goals, such as marketing materials, streamlining working with clients, firing clients, telling clients you love them, getting your website done, and more. Registration for our next term, which our 6-month term, starts November 15th. The term begins January 1st. I put a bunch of links up in the chat, and so all the way in the beginning, including seeing what our sessions are, creativesroundtable.com/about. It's creatives with an S. And I'm excited that we have the smart and savvy Melinda Livsey speaking today. I first came to know Melinda while I was watching the Future YouTube videos with Chris Do. I'm sure a lot of people have. I'm impressed with how she went from not charging strategy to revamping her offerings to charging $5,000, which she quickly raised to $10,000 for her strategy sessions. And people, that's on top of her branding and logo design fee. As the founder and creative director of Marks and Maker, Melinda unites over 10 years of professional design experience with a penchant for thoughtful customer service. Melinda, can also be found at Freelance, a resource for graphic design grads who want to start freelancing. And she recently started Inner Circle, a support system and steps for creative professionals to grow a successful, sustainable business, which I joined this month. And now I will turn it over to Melinda.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will share my screen. All right, so today's topic is going to be from a questionnaire to strategy. And we'll talk about what I mean by both of those as well, because I know we all have different definitions of both of them. And Nancy gave me a really nice introduction, so I don't really have to say my introduction because she pretty much said it. The only two things that she didn't mention were that I graduated in graphic design and illustration, so that's my traditional background. And I am from Orange County, California, in case you missed that part. And so today we're going to talk about going from a questionnaire to an in-person strategy workshop. First off, I want to start by defining what those two things mean, because I find that if we all have possibly different definitions of what a questionnaire is and what strategy is. And so I'm just going to tell you how I define them, and then you can compare how you define them up against that. And then afterwards too, we will have a Q&A, so feel free to ask me whatever you'd like. So how I define a questionnaire and how I've used it in the past is it's a series of questions, used to learn about a client's brand, their audience, and what they want in the design. So it's just a list of questions. I'll show you an example of what I used to use. It's usually, in my case, it was emailed as homework for my client, or it was used as an intake form when the client would reach out to me. And it could be on a designer's website. On mine, I used it after the client would sign with me, and I would send it as like the brief, trying to get all the information for the project. So this is a sample of part of my questionnaire. It was rather long, and it kept growing over time because I realized that I needed more and more information from my clients to design or whatever it was that I was doing for them. I needed more and more information from them to make it happen. And so it probably was 3 times the size of what you see right here. So how I define strategy. Strategy is a specific framework that I use, and it's used to uncover key insights about a client's brand and their ideal clients. And it is used, and I use it to determine what deliverables should be built for the brand that align to the goals of the company. So it's not just asking the order, or, what do you want in the design? What do you want it to look like? And who are your audience? But this is really used to uncover things as well as make sure that we're aligning to everything that the business is aiming at as far as the goals are concerned. And this is usually done, as opposed to just sending a questionnaire, it's usually done in a 1 to 2 day in-person workshop with a brand roadmap PDF of insights that I would send afterwards. My strategy goes for about 3 to 4 weeks. Some people I know just do the strategy workshop and then immediately will send the PDF right after. But because of the things that I include, it takes a little longer for mine. And in general, strategy is just a plan from point A to point B. So you see the difference already between this and the questionnaire, that this is actually forming the plan, whereas the questionnaire is more just asking what the plan already was. Strategy uncovers the why behind the brand, and this is very different from, even if I would ask the question in the questionnaire, why is your brand doing this, or why do they stand for this, I still wasn't getting deep answers. So I feel that I find the true why behind the brand when I use strategy. And its purpose is to uncover, like I had mentioned, what needs to be built to get the business to its goal. So when a client comes to me for something, when I used to send that questionnaire, I would assume that what the client came with and the desires that they wanted, say a logo or a website, that's really what they needed. But in strategy, we actually uncover what truly needs to be built to connect the ideal client to the brand. And mainly strategy is goal focused. So example of my strategic process. So I mentioned that strategy is a framework. It isn't a questionnaire, but it is, for me, I have a deck that I go through in the workshops. And so these are the things that we go through. We go through business goals, market segmentation, and take a 30,000 foot view of who they're serving and what the majority of those clients or customers, where they come from and who are they. And then we drill down even further and get into user personas. So we're actually making an outlined persona of their ideal clients. And also we'll call them users or clients or customers interchangeably. And then we also go over the goals and the problems of those customers. We normally go through a user journey. So how the client comes to know and become aware of the brand, all the way to advocacy. So it's awareness to consideration, conversion, relationship, and then advocacy. So how and why do they even share? So we'll touch upon all of that to see where there are opportunities that the client may have not even thought about just yet. We'll also go deep into the brand and talk about the brand attributes, maybe the backstory, the why, the competitive analysis, and also archetypes. And at the very end, we go through priorities. So based on all of this that we uncovered in the user journey and knowing about the brand, we then outline priorities that come out of that. So priorities could be things like, okay, we need to redo the website, we need to update the logo, a brand refresh, or we need to look at the social media. And normally that comes out of the user goals and problems, as well as the user journey. So just to give you a little background, and also if you guys are not on mute, if you could put yourselves on mute. So we'll go to my story. So as Nancy had mentioned, then was earlier last year, I was not charging for a questionnaire. And so that would be considered, I guess, my strategy at the time I was doing a questionnaire, and I was not charging separately for it. And now I'm charging $10,000 for strategy alone. And so I just want to give you some backstory on how I went from the questionnaire to now. So then what that looked like, I was offering mainly branding services, as I still am, but they were slightly different. And then at that time, I was using a questionnaire as homework for my client, like I had mentioned. And then it included the questionnaire as part of my branding package. So it was all together. The questionnaire was not separate from my branding package. Plus, because that would be kind of weird because it doesn't really give any value. So I couldn't take those apart. And at that time, I was charging around $6,500 for branding. So that was questionnaire, the branding package, and everything. Now what it looks like is I ditched the questionnaire and I charge separately for strategy. So I put strategy in place of the questionnaire, and I sell that separately, and I sell that first. And I made identity design into its own service. So I took that apart. And I also have not taken any clients who so far that have just purely wanted identity design separate from strategy, because how I frame it is that you have to go through strategy first for me to even be able to do the identity design. And then I have contact with the C-suite, so all the CEO, the CFO, and all the key decision makers, were, as opposed to previously, I was doing that last one, the last branding project that I did for 6,500, I only had contact with the senior designer and not with the owner or with the CEO of the company. And so that was a big shift for me to now be in the room with the C-suite or have direct contact with the owner, as opposed to maybe their designer or their creative director or marketing director, that I have to be with those key decision makers to be able to get the information that I need from it. So you already see that the information coming from strategy is going to be much different than a questionnaire. So pros and cons. There are pros and cons of both questionnaire and strategy. So the pros of the questionnaire, it's quick and easy, but mainly for me, not necessarily for my client. And it is baked into my process, or it was baked into my process. I had, I was keeping track of time just to make sure that I was pricing things right. And so it was baked into that process. It was baked into my onboarding process. It was easy. That's what I knew. And I knew how to design off it too. And so I was used to it. I was not only used to it in the onboarding process, but I was also used to it as far as how to design off of it. I knew what questions I needed to ask to get my predictable results. The cons of a questionnaire, however, again, it's homework for my client. I keep bringing this up because my coach, Chris, had totally ripped into me because I had mentioned that I use a questionnaire. And he goes, why would you ever give your clients homework? Do not do that. You need to start taking some of that heavy lifting off of your clients. And it was something that now is so clear to me. But when he had mentioned that, I didn't even, oh my gosh, it was just the aha moment came. And I thought, how did I never even think about this, that I was doing this to my client? Because I have also been in my client's shoes now since then, and hiring different people to work on my website, copywriters and whatnot. And I'm in the client's shoes. And then when they give me homework to do, it's really interesting because I get really frustrated now when I have to do all this homework, as opposed to the vendors and the subcontractors that I work for or work with or hire that put me through a strategy framework. Because I also have had friends who've done strategy on my own business, and I can be in the client's shoes and I feel, my gosh, there was so much more that came out of it for me because I was now able to see things through my client's eyes. So if you have never hired someone for your own business to work on certain things for it, I highly suggest it, even just to put yourself in the client's shoes to see that getting homework is not fun. And I didn't like it myself, so why would I expect my clients to? And during that time of using a questionnaire, I really felt like it reinforced the idea of being an order taker, or as I call it, a design slave. And so it's just taking someone's order, saying, what do you want? How do you want it to look? What do you want it to look like? And it was not digging deep in the behind the scenes of why and what's the motivation, and is that truly going to connect with your ideal client? Have you thought about this? There was a lack of depth in my design. My design, I was proud of my branding projects, but I now see the difference in the design and what is coming out of strategy, as opposed to what used to come out of the questionnaire. And it was just superficial. What I designed from the questionnaire was more superficial because I didn't have all of those deep motivations, the reasons, the whys, the stories, the really amazing stories that you can only get in a conversation. I couldn't get those. And so therefore I was only designing based on what I was given, and what I was given in the questionnaire was not as great as what I'm getting now. The thing the client wanted wasn't always what they needed. So when they came to me for, let's say, a brand refresh, which really all they needed was a tweak in, let's say, their social media, or there was something off in their sales funnel, and not that I'm always going to come in and fix those things, but at least if I'm able to identify, hey, this isn't the right time for you to be doing this brand refresh, then that is so much more valuable to my client rather than just taking their order and giving them back what they had asked for. And I noticed that it was attracting lower paying projects and clients, because what CEO and what larger company has time to fill out a questionnaire? Nobody has that. And although people will argue and say, well, we don't have time for a 1 to 2 day workshop, knowing what comes out of it, they will commit to that more than they will just sitting down and filling out a questionnaire. And using a questionnaire didn't open the door for more work for me or for the client. So it ended where it began. So they came to me for a logo design and branding, and it ended at a logo design and branding and nothing more. With anything. So I couldn't help them with any marketing material or print design. Once in a while they'd come back for things like that. But most of the time now, the strategy is opening up all of these it's a larger picture. So we get to see the whole relationship between the brand and the client or the customer. So we can see all these opportunities are popping up and the potential of what they could possibly do and what they could make. Whereas before, I was just taking their order. The pros of strategy. Now I'm seeing, and I see myself as well as a consultant versus an order taker. And I think part of this battle with moving from the questionnaire or moving from being a design slave to a consultant is really mindset. And this strategic approach has helped me see myself as a consultant, because I now bring so much more value to my client, even in just the workshop. The focus and the clarity and the aha moments that they have in these workshops, I see, and it gives me even more confidence to keep going. And it builds trust with my clients. Having that connection with them, especially in person. I've done it over Zoom before like this, and that's fine. It's, one step better, obviously, than a phone call, and even better than email. But that face-to-face time and that time that they can be with you and see how you think and work through problems, that it just builds trust. The more that they see you and they're familiar with you, the more they're going to trust you. And it reveals insights the clients didn't know. Those are the most fun when I'll listen to my client tell this story, this backstory about their business, and I'll just sit there and I'll start hearing patterns popping up and a theme coming up. And so when they're done, I will say, it sounds like you're saying this, or this sounds like you could wrap up that story in this. Would you agree with that? And they go, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. And it's so obvious maybe to outsiders, but how I describe strategy is that you're inside of a water bottle and you can't read the label. And so that's my client. My client's inside the water bottle and they're struggling to read the label. And I'm sure we've all been in that situation ourselves in our own businesses, where we can't do our messaging right, or how designers always say it is the hardest thing to design for yourself. It's because of that. We are inside and we can't see on the outside. And that's the same for our own clients. They're on the inside and they can't, when we give them a questionnaire, they can't always answer. They'll answer to the best of their ability, but they're not going to be able to articulate the way that it could happen if two people are together, like you and the client, and you're able to just sit there and listen and then tell that person what you heard or the insights you got from it. It's just a completely different process. And as I said before, better design came out of it. There's also, this was a big thing I did not expect to happen, less revisions and more objective revisions. When we did have changes, this was so amazing to me. And this is also, then everyone does this differently. And so it's how I've adapted the strategy framework that I've learned. And I've done it to where I actually only show one option and maybe variations, slight variations of one option. Let's say if we're getting into identity, because we've done so much work in strategy and we've narrowed down the concept of the brand before we've even seen anything. We start narrowing down the concept and the strategy behind the brand and where we're going, that when I start bringing in mood boards and inspiration and checking in with the client frequently, they're like, yes, we're going in the right direction. Yes, that is my ideal client. This is what they're doing. This is what they look like. This is a day in the life. I give a lot of visuals there to say, are we on the right track? This is who we're designing for. So if I go down this road, it's going to end up kind of in this vein. By the time we get to identity design, they look at it and they go, well, yeah, of course it's that. So I don't show 3 options anymore. I've cut that out. I only show the one. And then if I just want to show some slight variations, but doing that, then we get there. They're like, yeah, I mean, based off of all the strategy, we've done the thinking, we've done the hard work, and we both are in or we're in alignment, because I have very frequent check-ins where I don't just spring presentations on on my clients anymore. I'm frequently checking in with them weekly. This is where we're going. This is where it's heading. Do you agree? Is it what we talked about in strategy? Yes. Okay. So it's a collaboration, and it's so much more than getting the questionnaire, going into my design cave, coming out, ta-da, with 3 options that they're like, oh, I don't know, let's do a mixture of all 3. Then you go back and work for weeks and trying to figure out, how are you going to make 3 of these completely different options work? When if we just had a really strong direction and concept from the start before we even looked at anything visual, then we would know the direction to go and it would be obvious to everyone. And then objective revisions. So when someone says, well, I don't like this, or maybe this should change, it all goes back now to the original goals. Okay, well, is this going to serve the goal that we outlined? You said that, you wanted to attract this type of customer. Are those changes going to attract those types of customers? Why do we need to change it? And when they've seen the thinking behind all of the design, they really are in that mode of being objective. And so it's rare that I now have anyone giving me subjective revisions, because we are always going back to the thinking like, okay, well, this is why we did everything. So does that make sense? And if it does, we'll change it. Less time doing and more time thinking. Although I love to design, I like to think way more, and I like to get paid to think. And when I was in the time I was doing the questionnaire, I would give extra ideas. I'd be like, oh, it would be so cool if you did this or you did that in the business, or if you, I found this out about your ideal client, and what if you did this? And I never charged for that thinking, ever. But now, doing the strategy framework, I'm able to charge for that thinking because they go in knowing that's what we're doing. So that's been such a game changer for me. And then another pro, I'm able to sell it separately. So I've made another service on top of what I already had. It was a more collaborative approach. It reduced the number of options I had to show, which I mentioned. It's more valuable to the client overall, and it increased my revenue, and it helped my clients more. So it's helped them increase their revenue and get to where they're going. So my earlier clients, I've had a lot of them where their business just didn't go well, or they went under, or they shut down. And I know I'm not responsible for that necessarily, but I feel like I could have been more valuable to them if I came in with strategy first. I think we would have uncovered a lot of things that the client didn't think of, and I would have been more valuable. So I think in those instances, it might have been helpful for my previous clients. And then it opened the door for many more deliverables on top of what they originally came to me for. So one of those things have been messaging. I never did messaging ever. I would not touch it at all. It'd be like, you want anything written in the written word, you go to a copywriter, or you give me content. I'm not going to do it. Funny thing happened, and this might not happen for everyone, but for me, I was able to write messaging. It almost wrote itself. Like, there were things that my client said during our workshops that I said, oh my gosh, that's what you need to say in whatever it is, if it's a website, or just using those words to talk to your client. I said, have you ever mentioned that in your story? Have you ever said that on social media? And they're like, oh no, I didn't even realize that was important. And then once they thought of it, they're like, that's right. Why did we not use that? And it's that thing again, you're inside the water bottle, you can't see out of it. But I was able, uncovering the needs and the goals of the user, uncovering the brand story. I would hear things from the client. I would just write them down, and it ended up being, I gave it back to them in the strategy document, and there were messaging headlines. So there were headlines that could be given to a copywriter and saying, this is the tone and voice. This is how we want to sound. These are the types of things that we want to say to attract our ideal client. And then the copywriter was able to flesh out, let's say, an about page, or if they're able to flesh out a blog post. And so this was one of the first strategy, I think it was the first one that I did for a friend / client. But all these headlines came out of of this project, and I didn't mean it to happen. It just happened. And I said, oh my gosh, so using this strategy framework actually opens the door to one other service, which is messaging, which was so great for me because I realized I was designing, and just being a designer, there's nothing wrong with that. But I felt that I wanted to give a well-rounded branding experience for my client. So to not only give them the shell and the prettiness, but to give them the substance of the words with it was so exciting for me. So then I actually had copy, and I didn't have to wait for my client to go off to who knows what or to their own computer and type it themselves. But we were able to come up with really fun headlines. So for this, it's a translation company, and this the owner was having a lot of trouble getting those clients that were going towards like Google Translate and all you don't want to do that when you're dealing with like medical brochures and warranty cards. Like, you should not be going to Google Translate. And so we were just talking about translation in general. And so she's going to be pivoting as well more into the strategy for her own, which is really interesting for her own business. But we came up with headlines like, if Google Translate may have technique, but we have tact. Or just because talk is cheap doesn't mean your words have to be. And we said it once, we'll say it again in Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, French, German, and then listing out all of the languages that she translates into. So then these ended up being the back of her business cards. This is something I would have never thought of design-wise unless someone just came to me and said, hey, we have all these headlines and we want to put them on the back of our business cards. Then I would design them, sure. But I was able to think of this with my client, which was really exciting. And then another client recently, she designs cork handbags, and these headlines came out of strategy as well. It's party time. We've supplied the cork and the champagne. This was for the launch party because one of her headlines is, it's party time. We've supplied the cork. You supply the champagne, and that's her. When your order confirmation, that's what you'll get in the order confirmation. We also came up with a hashtag, Get Corky. Those, again, things, if I did come up with them in the questionnaire, I would have just given them for free. But in this, it's in my process. So there are some cons to strategy. It's difficult to sell and communicate. That's a whole other cow. Like, just to sell it and to communicate what it's going to do for the client and to attract people that want it is not as easy as I thought. It is too expensive for some clients. Even if they are interested, they don't want to have to pay separate for strategy and identity. The initial investment to learn for myself and implement does take time. So if you were thinking about it and you wanted to use a framework, you can piece things together and find things on YouTube and in books. But if you really wanted to invest in a strategy framework, some of them are expensive. This can exhaust introverts. I can't have too many of these workshops, even in a month. Like, I'd probably do 2 tops because it is really draining, especially if you're doing it for 2 days straight. And it requires designers to adjust and redo their process. So if this is something that you're thinking about and you're a designer, it was really difficult then for me to take all those findings and then create my own brief so that I could design from. But once I did get it, my design is so much better and it worked out. But it did take a lot for me to transition there. So you have to be prepared for that. And it does take commitment. There's so many times that I just like, well, can I just go back to what I was doing before? It was so much easier. And I had mentioned it's expensive to buy the strategy framework, and it is intimidating to start. I know some people, they'll learn strategy and then they don't sell it or they don't try it out with someone because it's so intimidating. It's so much more intimidating than just sending the email questionnaire, where it's not even just a phone call. It's you're meeting with this person. And the one thing that I was super scared about when I was doing a couple of these on Zoom, and I was screen sharing my deck. And so I was just writing notes as they're talking. My spelling, horrible. Like, in the moment when I have to spell and I'm talking with someone and I see they're looking at my words, I am so embarrassed. But there's so many times I'm like, hey, I'm a designer. I don't spell well. And so I have to always give the disclaimer. So even that, as little as I can't spell very well, is intimidating. And some people will learn it and they'll take forever to start because they just don't want to talk to people. And even talking to the C-suite is intimidating. So if you hear stuff in the background, it's my dog, FYI. How to transition to strategy from a questionnaire. So if you have listened to my story, you're interested and intrigued in moving forward with transitioning, I will give you some tips in how I did it and how you can too. So first you have to make the decision you want to transition and be all in. So when I did this, and when I started getting coached too, my work and my sales went down, like plummeted for a little while until now I feel the momentum. And that also has to do with, of course, marketing. But I was putting so much time into learning strategy and trying to implement it that then my marketing fell down. And so that's also something you have to think about, is how do you juggle learning this new framework with keeping your business running, right? And so I did have this time where it's like turning a big ship. Like it's just, I had to learn so much and all my brain power was there and it wasn't in my marketing. So don't make that mistake that I did. You can learn a strategy framework. The one that I learned from is from thefuture.com and it's called CORE. So that's their strategy framework and it is one that you can build on top of. So if you were to learn CORE, I would suggest making it your own. There are so many, once I learned it and I started using it, I thought, oh, well, I could add this. Oh, I could add this. And then I sat in with a couple people on their strategy workshops. And so I was actually able to see how they altered it too. And since then, I've met so many friends that have learned strategy and we all get on calls like this and we'll say, hey, I've tried this with a client and you should add this. There's also some books, The Value Proposition, and some people would take things from that and put them in. There's also a lot of books on archetypes, and you can, so it's a framework that you can build off of and you can make your own. And I would definitely suggest doing that. And you can ease into offering it as a service and just do a few for free. And I'll show my timeline of how I got to where I'm at too. Do a free beforehand just to get your feet wet. And the alternative, if this totally freaks you out, the alternative is just to really use into it, is just take your questionnaire that you currently have and do it over the phone. Simple. So instead of just sending it in an email, start by doing it over the phone, asking those questions, get used to even do it on Zoom if that's maybe one step further, and then doing it in person. But what you're going to find is all those follow-up questions you probably would have had from your questionnaire, you can ask them right then and there and get deeper and deeper and deeper. So this is my timeline from spring of last year. I was charging nothing for my questionnaire. Summer, I learned strategy. Fall, I offered 5 free strategy workshops for free. So I went around to I think it was 2 friends and 3 client/friends, ones I knew really well. And I said, I'm offering this new service, but the thing is, I need some case studies to just start because I needed something to show. I felt that I needed something to show to people who potentially wanted to sign with me on strategy. So I said, can I just do this for you? And they were really, some of them, I don't say they're really bad, but like, you're going to be bad when you first start and it's going to be awkward and you're not going to know how to go through the whole thing, or you're going to be like a robot and asking all these questions. And then after a while, you're going to get in the groove. So one of them was even my cousin. So he has his own business, his side business that he does, and he didn't need any deliverables. He just needed to know his ideal client better. And it was interesting because nothing came out of it as far as deliverables were concerned, but it gave him so much clarity. And we actually made a user persona and we called him Justin the Connector because he's this guy that, connects everyone. And so it was so funny because my cousin went to a conference and he's like, oh my gosh, I went there and everyone was Justin the Connector. So it was so cool to see that he was now able to focus in on who his ideal client was just because we did strategy. So you're going to see insights from this that come out of it way more than just identity design. And then from there in winter, I sold strategy for $1,000. I gave way more in it than, I even gave some visual options as well, but so much more in it than I would have previously. But I just wanted to sell it. Like, I just want to get paid. Just someone paid me $1,000 for it. They did. which was awesome. It went really well, happy client. And then I was able to take that case study and then land the next one for 2,500 in the winter as well. In the spring, I sold for 5,000, and then in the summer for 10. So I did just keep doubling it. And it depends on what type of clients that you're attracting. You're going to laugh, but back in the summer, fall, I was just learning strategy. And I went in with a friend to pitch a client, and we pitched it at 30,000 for strategy. And I didn't even know the framework yet. But I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure I could learn it by then. But we didn't land that one. I'm kind of glad we didn't, because I probably wouldn't know what I was doing at that time. But besides pitching that one for 30, I have just went double every single time. I don't know if I'm going to keep doubling it from here. I think it depends on the size of the company. And that company that we did pitch it for 30, it was an extremely large company. So you have to also think about that as, what type of clients are coming in your door, and how big are they and what's their revenue? Because if you come in at 10,000 and they're an extremely large company, they might look at you and think, do you even know what you're doing? Like, we were expecting to pay 50. So keep that in mind. But that, again, it's like a whole other thing because it's selling. Some tips for you: once you're comfortable with the new framework, learn to sell it separately from deliverables. I know some people that they just add that to their identity process, or whatever. Whatever deliverables that you guys do as far as design. I do identity, so I just keep referring back to that. But I know people do many things. So you can either include it with your current package, or you could sell it separately. And then I would also say, just start. Don't delay once you decide to do it. It is so easy to just think, I don't need to do it right now, or I'll try it next client. That just make a decision and do it, because I've seen too many people learn it and then stop because it is hard, and especially it's hard to sell. And then if you position yourself as an expert, so if you're starting to write thought pieces, if you're starting to, let's say, get on podcasts, or just even how friends talk about you and how you talk about yourself when you're describing what you do, you need to just start positioning yourself as an expert so that people see you as the person who can figure those problems out. The other thing is, I talked about strategy literally to anyone who would listen to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm learning this new thing. You got to hear it too. This is what I'm doing. This is what I did for this client. You want to see it? I would share it with everyone. Probably it was super annoying, but my friends knew then that I was doing it, and even other designers. And when a client would come to them and they'd say, hey, I need this done, I had one of my designer friends say, you know what? No, you need to go to Melinda for this. That actually happened to the $10,000 one. She's like, no. I can't do this. I'm a designer and all, but you need strategy first. So go to Melinda. So it was very interesting to see the more that people knew what I was doing. So I would just literally tell everyone. The more that people started seeing me as the brand strategist or as the expert in this thing. Learning strategy is easier with friends. So you guys have this wonderful group. And if you have some friends that want to also learn strategy, I highly, highly suggest that you get together with them and you learn it, you try it on some clients, and then you talk about it. Or also, what is really, really helpful is to learn the strategy framework and then do it on each other's businesses. So I had a small group of us 3 girls from the Future Pro group. We had learned strategy, and we each did strategy to practice and to learn from each other. We did it for each other. And so I originally had strategy done for me. Therefore, I could be in the client's shoes as well as practice and learn how other people do it and how people ask questions. And then I also had some other people from the pro group that I also, I'd have questions like, what does this even mean? And how do I uncover, like, what if a client doesn't want to have one user persona because they want to attract everybody? What do you do then? So you're going to run into a lot of questions, and it does help if you have other friends that are going through the same thing, and you can figure that out with them. And have someone do strategy for your own business. So that's all I got. Thank you. And here's where you can find me. Nancy, you are, I think, muted.
Oh, okay. Do you want to unshare your screen?
Sure.
So I can, I'm going to put Chris's, well, lots of people there. I'm going to, why can I get out of that? I want to put the, sorry, the link's in again. That's Chris's link for the future that you mentioned. Does anyone, I have questions, but I'll let other people go first. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Hello, Melinda.
Hi.
What I've done this stuff with Chris too, like 2 years ago when he had a group of only like 20 people.
Oh, yeah.
So what is your deliverable to the client, or like what are you including in that package when you're charging 10,000? Like, are you doing stylescapes in there or just the brief?
Right. So this previous one, I was still kind of figuring out what's going to be in it. But now what I've realized is that it is a PDF. It has all of positioning statement, it has a user persona, and it has a visual representation of the client persona. So I say this is a day in the life empathy graph. I don't know if you guys ever went through that. But I actually visually represent what we talked about in strategy, and I show it to them. And so it's a PDF full of that type of reference. And then yes, a stylescape. My previous stylescapes, I accidentally went too far and went too much into identity. And so I need to pull it back and do more of like a mood board. So it's going to have enough inspiration that gets them excited, but it's not going to be any actual tangible identity pieces. So yeah, it'll be visuals though.
Okay. And what are you calling that deliverable to the client? Because that's where I always got hung up. Like, am I calling this a brand brief or like a strategy or something?
Yeah, I call it, what do I call it? A brand strategy roadmap.
Okay.
So I call it a roadmap. And it is the way I do it. And I know this is so different than a lot of people, but I do a working roadmap that I will follow up and show them the next week and say, hey, this is where messaging is at. This is where positioning is at. Are you on board? They say yes. I go on to the next week and show them visuals. Say, this is what your client, this is a day in the life of your client. Would you agree? Because anything we need to design would need to fit into their life. And then from there, we would go to stylescapes, and they'd have the priorities listed in there as well.
Do you have, so when you're checking in before showing the logo, do you have certain things that you show them along this roadmap for each check-in?
Yeah. So I'll show, usually I'll show like inspiration. So that would go into what we were talking about, the stylescape. Inspiration as far as the look and the feel. So I'll actually pull some, logos that are in the vein of what I'm thinking and say, okay, if we went down this direction, is this, would you agree from what we've already discussed in strategy? So yeah, I will show visual representation. Anyone have a question? Karen?
Hi, thank you. That was wonderful. As you were talking, one of the things I was wondering was, do you do all this work yourself, or do you hire subcontractors to help do different pieces? Or if you'd mentioned the copywriting, so do you just say, okay, go find your own copywriter, this is their document to work from, or how do you help them build based on your strategy?
Yeah, so I've hired a brand strategist to accompany me before to a workshop. Most of all of the stuff that goes into the roadmap, I've done myself. Once in a while, I'll have a designer come in to do the stylescapes. And then from there, I would usually, if they say, okay, now we need website copy or we have to start the website, I would then say, okay, you need to take this roadmap because it does have messaging examples. But I tell them it's the high level. This is high level brand strategy. It is not the down and dirty stuff. So I hook them up usually with a copywriter, or they already had a copywriter in mind. Someone I just worked with had a copywriter in mind. So what that one did, she just took the roadmap and took that messaging examples and then was able to write the whole website copy based off of it.
Any other questions? Nadine?
Yeah. So during those 1 or 2 day sessions that you do with the clients, how are you working with them and how are you recording things? Because I know personally, like trying to write down in a meeting is really tricky, and you can always read it after you leave. So I saw the picture of the whiteboard. Like, do you get them working on, like, is it around the table? Like, how do you facilitate that? And how do you read it afterward?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've done it a few different ways depending on what we have available to us in the meeting room. I started out doing it just as a deck on my computer. In Keynote, I opened it up and just used it as my note taking. And it had charts and whatnot. And clients, I felt, were getting just overwhelmed with seeing charts and things like that. And so I would hook it up to the HDMI cable and project it onto the TV. So that's how I first did it. And I was able to talk and take notes. I didn't, I know some people actually do record their sessions. I haven't done that yet. I probably will, but I haven't yet. The one that was larger, and we did have 8 people in the meeting. We did, that was the one where I had a brand strategist come with me, and she was actually my note taker. And so she took the notes, and we ended up she just took the notes on her computer. We did hook it up to the TV, but we didn't even look at it most of the time. And then the last part of it, we did on the whiteboard. And then we took photos of it on our phone to then record it into the roadmap later. So that's how we've done it so many different ways. I think it just depends on what you have available to you. And I know writing on whiteboards, people feel like, yeah, that's awesome. They think you're really an expert if you write on a whiteboard. I don't know why.
A lot of those whiteboards, you can actually email the information to yourself too, which is great. So what are like 1 or 2 examples of key insight questions that you do ask the clients?
Well, the ones where I have gotten the juiciest stuff is hearing their backstory. So I asked them just, what led you here? And get them. So when I first was doing strategy, like I said, I would go through everything like a robot, just go through each thing and each chart and whatever it was. And now I've realized, no, make it more of a conversation. So I asked them about their backstory, and I asked them, what made you start? What happened? Like, what got you to here? And I tried to, because a lot of times I'll start out with a superficial answer, and then I'll find something they said and I'll say, oh, tell me more about that. Oh, how so? How was that? Why was it that way? And I'll keep asking those questions to get deeper and deeper and deeper, but it usually happens with the brand story. And that's where a lot of magic comes out of it.
Okay. Any other questions?
So what size clients are you working with? Or what type of businesses are they?
They most recently, I've been targeting, also because I've been getting a lot of them, fashion designers. And now I'm moving into home. So home investment, real estate investment, builders. I'd love to get into boutique hotels. So I'm trying to get into the homes, which I am in, and to lead me to boutique hotels and hospitality. So this is all lifestyle. I work with lifestyle brands mainly. No apps, no tech, usually any of that. So,
Valerie, you're muted. Hold on. Okay, I unmuted you. Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is about how you don't give it away for free. You were saying that people ask you advice and you're quick to sort of offer suggestions, but it's really tough to say to somebody, oh my God, yeah, that's a great question. I have a million ideas, but they're not part of this strategy session. You have to pay me extra for them. Like, how do you find that you deal with that?
Are you saying, is this before or after? Is this during strategy? When would this happen?
To me, it happens during, where they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's one of the issues we're dealing with right now, but it may be something that's not part of it. It would almost be tactical down the road, but they're asking you now.
That's a good question. I'd probably just make note of it and show them that I made note of it. Like, okay, well, I'll make note of that and we can circle back to it after strategy, or we can see if that's still going to be a need after strategy. So I always, I put a lot of the weight on the framework and say like, okay, like we can have a million ideas. That's great. We'll just make note of that for later, or put that on the priority list for afterwards. Like that is something we're going to have to talk about later, and put that on the list for later.
What does a strategy case study what's in it? When you said you wanted to compile strategy case studies so that you can then go out and sell more strategy sessions.
Well, during that time, it was just the roadmap. So I didn't even, because I didn't have time to make a full on, like, this is what insights came out of it, and do it in a very pretty way. I just took the roadmap that I had showed the client that I did it for. And to someone who wanted to see what that was about, I just said, if you're interested and you don't know what this is about, can I just show you? And I run them through the roadmap, and I tell them the insights as we're talking. So I just quickly go through it. And one of them, she saw the messaging and she's like, oh my gosh, you did that messaging? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, I want that. And then that was one of the ones that booked with me. And so it was just showing the roadmap. I need to work on a great case. I have one case study yet from one of the strategies that I did, but I just have been using the roadmaps as my quote unquote case study.
And what do you tell people that they get in the strategy session?
I have an outline, and it's really, I say that we go over your brand. We get to know your brand, your positioning, your mission, if you don't have that. And we get to know your ideal clients, a persona, user journey, and then priorities. So we'll come out with a list of priorities of what we know we need to do next. And I usually don't even list out all that stuff until I put it in the proposal, because the sales call has changed a lot over time. But yeah, that's what they would get. And I'd tell them a PDF of insights and suggestions on how to move forward.
Great. Any other questions? You can type the questions in too if you are speaking shy. Tara?
Hello. Hey, Melinda, this was great. I absolutely love you on the future. I always feel like you are us when you have reactions and everything. It's usually what I'm thinking too. So when you started to offer strategy and you divided out your brand strategy services and your identity design, how did you think about pricing? How did your pricing for identity design change since you were starting to price for strategy?
Oh gosh, I feel like I just now am figuring that out, because I was accidentally putting too much into the stylescape where it was like, oh, that's the identity. I just showed them identity. Oh, this was a part of strategy, and totally goofed on that. So now I'm thinking through what is actually going to be in my identity package. So apart from strategy, I'm outlining that currently. And I am, at the moment, if strategy is 10,000, then identity will be 20. That's what I'm aiming at the moment. I haven't solidified that yet, but in talking to Chris, he's like, well, the identity should be way more. But then I've gotten pushback from clients that say, well, we've done all of the work was done in strategy. I don't understand why identity is so much more. So
right.
I don't know.
And do you give them the strategy and identity pricing that they sign on beforehand, and then they come back to you and say, why is this portion more than what
I've had that once. Yeah, I did have that once. I usually try to give them ranges. So I give them a firm price on strategy, and then in the proposal, I'll give them ranges for the rest, because we don't know exactly, do they need a full on style guide that's like 100 pages? Do they just need very limited branding? So I try to give them ranges just because I don't fully know what they need yet. But yes, I've had one of my strategy clients that they come back later and like, oh, well, I thought we did all this work in strategy. Why would identity be more? So I'm still figuring that out.
So Lydia said, do you have scaled back pricing for smaller clients like nonprofits, or do you just not take on that type of work?
I don't necessarily take on, well, also nonprofits do have money. I know that's a misconception with a lot of things, but as far as scaled back things, I have now broken up strategy into pieces. So finding your ideal client, a brand audit I'm going to start doing, and that is, it's like taking parts of strategy and charging separately. So if someone does not have $10,000 to start, but they really want to work with me, that's how I've made it so that they can start working with me. And I also offer 1-hour consulting as well. But I only offer that. I don't offer that to like the general public. I will only offer that to qualified leads that I actually really want to work with, but I find their budget is just not there. Or they might need might need help to get to the point to move forward. So yes, I have a few scaled back offerings.
Mallory said, regarding your PDF with insights, can you give some examples of what would be in the insights?
Insights would be, one example was with the cork purse designer. One insight was a word that is a thread throughout her entire brand. And it came from listening to her story. And so she was talking about her story and from growing up and what she believes in, that she's very pro-USA, pro-US made things, very, very into like, if you want to do something, you have the freedom to go do it. And that we're not bound by, most of what we're bound by is our limiting beliefs or ourselves, but really do have the freedom to go out and do this. And so she's talking about her story. Everything kept going back to freedom. And so when she was done talking, I said, I think where your brand is around is freedom. And then I was able to connect it to her bags that she designed. So her bags are designed so that you can go from the day to the night to the beach. You can throw it in the washing machine because it's cork and it can be clean. Like it's amazing. So you can fit a ton in your bag. So there's freedom to go from different situations with the bag, but there's also the freedom of putting anything in it as well. And so it connected with her story. And so that was a big insight that came out of it. So it was just one word, which was freedom, but it's laced through all of her messaging as well as her brand story. And so that would be one insight. So it's finding patterns in what they say and connecting it to their product or their service and why those things connect, or maybe it's a pattern that I noticed in them and how it serves their client. Like, oh, well, you keep doing this and this is what your client needs and it aligns. So those are the types of insights that usually come out of it.
We have 1 more minute. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, then I'll ask one. What do you put in a brand audit?
I'm developing that currently. It's going to be most likely a superficial brand audit. Like, you tell me where you feel there's a disconnect, and I'll go look at all of the touch points of your brand and go through it like I was a customer, and see what those things are. So it could be messaging. Most likely it's going to be highlighting messaging things. So if something's off in any type of messaging on their website, any type of identity, things are hard to read, or just for whatever reason, it doesn't connect with the ideal client that they say they have. And then I'll put those into a PDF of insights.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing this with us.
You're welcome.
I got a lot out of it, and I know everybody else did as well. And I will see you in the group that I just joined of yours.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me.